Imagine for a second locking your absolute most valuable possessions in a bank vault.
Right.
You completely trust the bank manager to keep them safe. But then, you wake up one day to discover that the vault was robbed,
Mhm.
and not by some outsider. It was robbed from the inside.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a terrifying thought.
It is, right. You're holding a document with, like, the official seal of the Prime Minister's office, a direct order from the state secretary, and explicit orders from the district magistrate.
Basically the highest authorities you can get.
Exactly. This paperwork is the culmination of years of just agonizing struggle. And it proves definitively that your family's land was stolen. So you take this undeniable proof, you hand it to the presiding magistrate, and you expect action. You expect the gavel to come down.
Yeah, you'd think that's the end of it.
But instead, you're met with just absolute terrifying silence. That the official looks at the paper, looks at you, and does nothing.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, it's a special kind of paralysis because you aren't fighting a villain in a dark alley. You are fighting the very machinery that was built to protect you.
Exactly.
When the actual architecture of justice just refuses to operate, it leaves a citizen in this state of, well, essentially an existential freefall.
And that free fall is exactly the subject of today's deep dive. We are looking at this unfolding real-world crisis centered around a farmer named Shiv Govind Singh.
Right, down in Azamgarh.
Yeah, living in the village of Shailendra. And our sources for this deep dive are they're fascinating. We have a detailed biographical account of his ongoing legal battle. It's titled Pride of the Soil, Shiv Govind's Journey for Justice, or Simbogan in Hindi. And we're pairing that with this highly potent, heavily metaphorical cartoon strip called 4 Questions and Silent Administration.
Yeah.
And the craziest part, we aren't talking about abstract history here. The pivotal courtroom confrontations we were going to break down happened just 2 days ago.
Literally just happened.
Yeah, on May 8, 2026. Our mission today is to use this saga to really understand the immense complexities, the psychological toll, and, quite frankly, the systemic vulnerabilities of local land administration.
Which means the dust hasn't even settled yet. And while it might be tempting for you listening to view this as just some localized property dispute, like, oh, a missing deed in a rural district, that drastically understates the stakes here.
How so?
Well, if we examine the anatomy of what happened in Azamgarh, we are actually looking at a massive stress test of Article 21 of the Constitution.
The right to life and personal liberty. Okay, let's unpack this because I want to challenge that connection right out of the gate.
Sure.
Property disputes happen literally every single day. The courts are just clogged with them.
Right, absolutely. Backlogged for years.
Right. So how do we draw a straight line from, like, a forged land deed to a violation of a fundamental human right to life? It seems like a leap.
It does seem like a leap, but it comes down to how identity and livelihood are constructed in agrarian societies. Article 21 has been repeatedly interpreted by the highest courts to mean much more than just, mere animal existence. It includes the right to live with human dignity.
Right. Dignity is the key word there.
Exactly. For a 60-year-old farmer like Shiv Govind, who, by the way, is already battling severe heart disease, his identity isn't separate from his land.
It's basically who he is.
Right. He owns 1.919 hectares divided across 7 specific plots. And we have the GATA numbers here, 96, 90457, 177, 374, 379, 381, and 454.
That's a lot of separate pieces of land.
It is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these aren't just financial assets to him. They are the physical manifestation of his ancestry. His actual sweat is in that soil.
Wow, yeah.
So if an administrative system quietly erases his right to that land through forgery, they haven't just stolen his money. They have erased his sociological existence. They have rendered his entire life's work invisible.
Okay, that makes sense. It's not like a stock portfolio dropping in value or a bad crypto investment. It's the ground beneath his feet, literally being pulled away by a bureaucratic pen.
Exactly.
But I really want to understand the nuts and bolts of this erasure. How does 1.9 hectares of physical dirt just vanish from an official record?
Well,
Because our sources indicate the roots of this deception began way back in 2007. It was under the guise of this land consolidation process, which gave them cover for a massive forgery in 2013. The land was fraudulently transferred to 2 individuals, Suya Devi and Gayatri Singh.
yeah, to understand how a fraud like that even happens, we really have to look at the massive administrative undertaking known as land consolidation, or Chakbendi, as it's often called in India.
Right, I've heard that term.
Yeah, so historically, because of generational inheritance, a single farming family might own several tiny scattered slivers of land all over a village.
Like the 7 different GATA numbers we just listed for Shiv Govind.
Exactly. It's an incredibly inefficient way to farm. I mean, you can't easily run an irrigation system or drive a tractor across 5 disjointed plots spread miles apart.
So I'm guessing the government steps in to solve the puzzle. Like they assess everyone's scattered holdings, throw them into a giant pool, and then redistribute the land.
That's exactly it. The goal is so everyone gets 1 or 2 large consolidated blocks that are equal in value to what they previously held.
Okay, that actually sounds like a really sound agrarian policy on paper.
On paper, yes, it is. But think about the sheer logistical reality of executing that. The entire village's revenue records are essentially frozen.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about that.
Right. Every single plot must be physically surveyed, valued, and reassigned. Old registers are closed forever, and entirely new registers are drafted.
This sounds like an administrative nightmare.
It is. This requires an absolute army of local revenue officials. Specifically, we're talking about the Lekpal, the village accountant, and the Tehsildar, and they have to manually transcribe, update, and certify thousands of individual data points.
Wait. Manual transcription.
Yes, handwritten.
So, amidst this massive village-wide shuffling of property lines, where everyone's attention is entirely focused on where their new boundaries will be drawn, these local officials are just handwriting the new reality into existence.
Yes, and that right there is the vulnerability. Land consolidation creates this enormous, chaotic window of opportunity. It basically acts as a systemic smokescreen.
That's terrifying.
It is. If a bad actor wants to steal land, they don't do it when the village is quiet and the records are static, They do it during the chaos of consolidation.
I see.
During the transcription phase from the old book to the new book, a Lekpal can simply omit a name, alter a boundary line, or, as in Shiv Govind's case, quietly record the land in the names of entirely different people.
Right. Siu Devi and Gayatri Sons.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this analogy. It's basically the modern equivalent of identity theft, right? Like a database hack during a massive server migration.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah, because the IT team, or in this case, the village accountants, they're so busy moving terabytes of data that no one notices a few lines of code being altered.
Yeah.
By the time the migration is over and the new system goes live in 2013, Shiv Govind looks at the new ledger and his name is just gone.
Gone. And this is where the nightmare truly begins for the citizen. Because in the eyes of the local administration, the paper reality totally supersedes physical reality.
Really?
Well, Shiv Govind could be literally standing on the land, holding the plow, working the soil. But if the new consolidated revenue ledger says the land belongs to Gayatri Singh, legally, Shiv Govind is a trespasser on his own ancestral soil.
That is just wild. So what is his recourse? Because if the local Lekpal and the Tehsildar are the ones who actually manage this fraudulent transcription, he obviously can't go to them to fix it.
No, definitely not.
They are either the architects of the fraud or just grossly negligent.
Exactly. Which forces Shiv Govind and his son, Shailendra Singh, who has really taken up this fight alongside him, into a desperate administrative pivot.
Right. They have to look elsewhere.
Yes. By April 17, 2026, they realize the local hierarchy is completely compromised, so they bypass the entire district administration.
They just leapfrog them.
Totally. They utilize a digital grievance portal to file a direct complaint with the Prime Minister's office in New Delhi.
Wow. Straight to the PMO.
Straight to the top.
Yeah.
The grievance was officially registered under a very specific designation. We even have the number. PMOPGE 26006485
Okay, I find this fascinating just from a sociological perspective. You have this elderly, sick farmer in rural Azamgढ dealing with the most ancient of resources, dirt, soil, agriculture, and he's having to interface with this centralized digital federal grievance system just to get his local accountant to tell the truth.
It's jarring, isn't it?
It feels like 2 different centuries just crashing into each other. And you mentioned Shiv Govind's philosophical stance earlier. He views this not just as a property dispute, but as a fight for those Article 21 constitutional rights.
Yes, stripping him of his land strips him of his right to live with dignity. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly illustrates the dichotomy of modern governance.
How so?
Well, on one hand, the existence of this digital grievance portal, the system that routes these complaints to the PMO, is a technological marvel. It theoretically democratizes access to the highest executive power in the country.
Right. A villager doesn't need to buy a train ticket to Delhi and wait outside a ministry building for a week.
Exactly. They can log a complaint and get a tracking number from a local internet cafe or a smartphone.
But, and this is a huge but, the very fact that they have to do this is a massive indictment of the local system.
Precisely. You do not escalate a local property deed dispute to the prime minister of a nation of 1.4 billion people unless there is a complete systemic collapse of trust at the municipal and district levels.
Yeah, you don't call the CEO because the cashier gave you the wrong change, unless the store manager is in on the scam.
That's a great way to put it. Shivgavin's use of the PMO portal is a distress flare. It is a gamble that the bureaucratic rate of a PMO directive routing back down through the state secretary and the district magistrate will create enough top-down pressure to crush whatever local apathy or corruption caused the fraud in the first place.
So put yourself in their shoes for a second.
Yeah.
Imagine the emotional whiplash here. If I'm Shailendra and I get that PMO registration number in my hand, and I get the subsequent orders from the upper administration demanding action, I'm feeling a massive surge of hope.
Oh, you'd have to be.
I'm thinking, okay, the local officials might ignore me, a poor farmer. But they cannot ignore the Prime Minister's office. This is over.
That is the logical assumption. When you secure a mandate from the very top, you expect the local machinery to finally snap to attention, if only out of sheer self-preservation.
Right. You don't want the PMO breathing down your neck.
Exactly. You expect a swift, decisive correction of the record.
Which brings us to the morning of May 8th, 2026. Literally 2 days ago. The scene is the court of the subdivisional magistrate, Narendra Kumar Gangwar. Shiv Govind and Shailendra walk in, and they are armed with these top-down directives. The files detailing the forgery of the 7 plots are sitting right there on the STM's desk.
The evidence is all there.
The atmosphere has to be incredibly heavy. Shiv Govind is looking at the magistrate like a god of justice, hoping this is the day the nightmare finally ends. But the legal reality they collide with is just baffling.
It is completely baffling, and the antagonist in this specific moment isn't even the original fraudster. It's the opposing counsel, a lawyer named Raghav.
Okay.
And lawyer Raghav doesn't walk into the courtroom with, a stack of evidence proving his clients bought the land legally. He doesn't bring witnesses to refute the forgery.
Then what does he bring?
He brings a vakalatnama.
Okay, let's break that down, because it sounds like just a minor technicality, but it's clearly being weaponized here. What exactly is a vakalatnama, and why does it stop the PMO's momentum dead in its tracks?
So, a vakalatnama is essentially a legal document that empowers a lawyer to represent a client in an Indian court. It establishes the lawyer's formal standing in the case.
So it's like a power of attorney for representation.
Exactly. It is a standard, fundamental piece of procedural law. When lawyer Raghav submits this, he is officially entering the arena. But, this is the kicker, he doesn't enter to fight.
What does he do?
Having established his presence, he immediately invokes his procedural rights to demand an adjournment. He says, "I'm new to this case. I need more time to review the files and prepare a response."
And the STM just gives it to him, even with the PMO directive sitting literally right there on the desk.
He does. STM Gangwar directs the process to continue, and he instructs his reader, an official named Ajay Kumar Singh, to assign a new hearing date.
Unbelievable.
So the reader flips open the register and pushes the case 15 days into the future.
Wow. Okay, I have to push back on the STM's actions here. How can we view this as anything other than complicity? If you have explicit orders from superior officers to resolve a clear-cut case of forgery, and you let a lawyer walk in, file a single piece of paper, and completely stall the proceedings, aren't you actively participating in the injustice?
It's a very compelling argument, but we have to examine what I call the tyranny of procedure. Within the strict confines of the judicial process, the SDM is actually adhering to the principles of natural justice.
Natural justice by delaying it.
Yes, because natural justice dictates that when a new representative enters a case, they cannot be forced to argue immediately. They must be given reasonable time to prepare. So, technically, the SDM is following the rules.
But the rules are being used as a weapon.
Yep.
It's like bleeding a clock in a sports game.
Yes.
The opposing side doesn't need to win the argument today. They just need to run out the clock on Shiv Govind's health and resources.
Exactly. And that is what makes this so insidious. This is the strategy of attrition. The judicial system is notoriously overburdened, and savvy defense lawyers know exactly how to exploit procedural safeguards to bleed the clock.
Because why is a 15-day delay a devastating blow?
Yeah.
For a healthy 25-year-old, it's a minor inconvenience.
Right.
But look at the plaintiff here. Shiv Govind is 60 years old, suffering from a failing heart. Every single trip to that courthouse is a grueling test of endurance.
It is a massive physical toll. It is emotional and it is financial. Lawyer Raghav and his clients understand that they don't actually need to win the legal argument on its merits.
They don't need to prove the 2013 transfer was legitimate.
Not at all. They simply need to run out the clock on Shiv Govind's endurance. If they can secure enough 15-day adjournments, eventually the plaintiff's health will fail, the family's resources will dry up, and the stolen land remains in their possession by default.
God, the punishment isn't the verdict. The punishment is the process.
Perfectly stated. The process is the slow torture.
But, while the opposing lawyer was trying to run out the clock with these delays, Shailendra wasn't just sitting idly by in the gallery. He was actively looking at the revenue records. And what he found changes this from a case of bureaucratic delay into a case of active, terrifying sabotage.
It really does. This is the turning point.
Because he discovers that the records have undergone a material correction.
Yes. And to understand the absolute gravity of a material correction in this context, we need to explore a critical legal doctrine. It's called custodia legis.
Right, custodia legis, which translates to in the custody of the law, correct?
Yes. When a matter is sub judice, meaning it is under active judicial consideration, the evidence, the property records, the ledgers, all of it is brought under the protective umbrella of the court.
They are locked down.
Exactly. They are placed in the legal vault, so to speak. The foundational premise of any justice system is that while the judge is deciding who is right and who is wrong, the evidence itself is sacrosanct. It is untouchable.
Okay, so a material correction isn't just someone, fixing a typo.
Oh, absolutely not. What's fascinating here is the sheer audacity of it. A minor clerical error is, a misspelled village name or a wrong date of birth. A material correction implies a deliberate surgical strike on the core facts of the case.
We're talking altering boundary lines, ownership percentages, historical transfer dates.
Yes, substantive alteration.
Oh, wait, let's really look at the mechanics of this because it's horrifying to think about. The case is actively being heard in the SDM's court.
Right.
The entire dispute is about whether the records were forged back in 2013. And while the trial is happening, someone physically goes into the government record room, pulls the exact ledgers that are currently under custodia legis, and alters them.
That is exactly the allegation Shailendra brings forward. And you can see how it changes the entire complexion of the crisis.
Oh, completely.
This is no longer just external fraud committed by private citizens 13 years ago. This is internal tampering.
Wow.
It signifies that the very institution tasked with protecting the evidence, the administrative staff managing the record room, is complicit in doctoring the evidence in real time to favor the defense.
I mean, on behalf of anyone listening to this, how is this even possible? Yeah. If you can't trust the literal physical evidence held by the court in its own vault, what is the foundation of the justice system? It's just a sham.
It is the complete collapse of the social contract between the citizen and the state. If the physical reality of the evidence can be rewritten by a clerk while the judge is deliberating, there is no foundation. It's just a theater performance.
It's totally fake. And this shocking realization that the system itself is compromised from the inside out, it pushes Shailendra beyond just filing legal motions.
He realizes he isn't fighting a legal battle anymore.
Right. He is fighting an institutional disease. And that drives him to demand a preliminary inquiry directly from SDM gang war regarding how these officials altered records inside the record room. And it also drives him to ask 4 fundamental, piercing questions about the nature of power and silence.
Yes, and this profound frustration is brilliantly captured in our second source material.
The cartoon strip.
Exactly. The allegorical cartoon strip, 4 questions and silent administration. It's a visual, metaphorical distillation of Shailendra's real-life frustration with this exact institutional disease.
Okay, let's break down the setting of this cartoon because it sets a stark scene. You have Shailendra standing in the Sadar Tehsil building, the local revenue headquarters, and he's holding his PMO orders, his secretary orders, his DM orders.
All his proof.
All his proof.
Yeah.
And he's facing the SDM, who is sitting under a massive wall hanging that reads, Satyameva Jayate.
Truth alone triumphs.
Right, truth alone triumphs. But the SDM is completely, totally silent. And Shailendra poses these 4 panels, 4 questions to the SDM to try and diagnose this silence.
And these 4 questions are just a masterclass in categorizing the anatomy of bureaucratic failure. I mean, if an official has clear orders from superior authorities and clear evidence of fraud, yet refuses to act, there are logically only 4 reasons why.
Okay, let's go through them. Question 1 is about internal sabotage. Shailendra asks if the lower-level officials, specifically the Tehsildar, the Lekpal, the Peshkar or court clerk, and the computer operator, are essentially blinding and gagging the magistrate.
Right. This explores the illusion of executive power. We tend to think of the magistrate, the SDM, as the person in absolute control.
Like the captain of the ship.
Exactly. But decision makers are entirely dependent on the flow of information. If the Lekpal and the computer operator are the ones pulling the files, organizing the data, and summarizing the grievances, they control the magistrate's reality.
The gatekeepers have more power than the boss.
Precisely. If the administrative staff in the record room are the ones making the material corrections, they are filtering what reaches the SDM's desk. So this first failure mode suggests the magistrate is silent because he is essentially a prisoner of his own corrupt subordinates.
He doesn't act because the true facts are being actively hidden from him.
Right, by the very people employed to provide them.
That is a structural nightmare.
Yeah.
But the second diagnosis explores a much more blunt force failure, undue external pressure. Question 2 asks, is a litigating party holding your pen physically stopping you from writing the order?
Yeah, this tackles the harsh realities of power dynamics, money, and political muscle in rural governance. It asks the terrifying question, is the justice system paralyzed because the opposing party is simply too wealthy or powerful to rule against?
But even with the Prime Minister's office looking over your shoulder, I mean, surely that trumps local muscle.
You'd think so, but the PMO is hundreds of miles away in Delhi. The litigating party, the local mafia, or the wealthy landowner, they are right outside your office door in Azamgarh.
Good point.
This failure mode suggests the magistrate is fully aware of the truth and fully aware of his duties, but is paralyzed by fear, bribery, or political pressure. The silence is just a survival mechanism.
Okay, what if it isn't subordinate manipulation and it isn't local mafia pressure? Question 3, the third diagnosis, is almost darkly comedic, but arguably just as dangerous. Genuine incompetence.
Yes.
Shailendra asks the magistrate, are you reading the law book upside down? Do you simply not understand the sale deeds, the victim's education, or the orders from your superiors?
And the cartoon visualizes this beautifully by showing the magistrate literally holding the legal code upside down. It's a brutal critique.
It really is.
It proposes that the person sitting in the chair of justice, tasked with unwinding a complex, multi-year land consolidation fraud, simply lacks the intellectual or professional capacity to synthesize the evidence.
So they aren't corrupt. They are just deeply, deeply out of their depth. They freeze because they literally don't know how to move the machinery.
Yes. They are technically present, occupying the seat of power, but functionally illiterate in the application of complex justice. The silence in this case is the silence of confusion.
Which brings us to the fourth and final diagnosis, which I think is definitely the most chilling. It's the idea of willful ignorance or malicious apathy. Shailendra asks, or, with the Constitution open right in front of you, are you intentionally looking the other way?
Yeah, this is the darkest of the four options. It strips away all the excuses, it says. You aren't being tricked by your staff. You aren't being threatened by thugs. And you aren't too incompetent to understand the law.
Right.
The Constitution is open, the forgery is obvious, the orders are clear, and you are simply choosing to look the other way.
It's a conscious dereliction of duty. It's looking at a 60-year-old sick farmer whose life is being systematically dismantled and deciding that you simply do not care enough to intervene.
And that malicious apathy is what makes the backdrop of the cartoon so biting. Sitting in silence while injustice occurs, right beneath a sign that declares truth alone triumphs, it just highlights the agonizing gap between the ideals of a democratic state and the lived reality of its citizens.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? What makes this breakdown so vital, whether you are dealing with rural land law in India or trying to navigate a massive corporate bureaucracy in your own life, is that these four failure modes are universal.
Absolutely universal.
Whenever a system fails you, whenever you face a silent administration, like a customer service wall or a local council that won't respond, it is almost always one of these four reasons.
Right.
You are blocked by the gatekeepers, out-muscled by external pressure, dealing with someone incompetent, or facing someone who simply chooses not to care. Shailendra's questions aren't just about his land. They are universal diagnostic tools.
They really are. It transforms Shivgovin's deeply personal struggle into a framework for understanding systemic failure anywhere. But crucially, the narrative of our sources doesn't end in nihilism.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't suggest that because these systems are flawed, we should just surrender to the silence.
Exactly. The final panel of the cartoon and the conclusion of this entire saga provides the ultimate thesis here.
Hmm.
It is a fierce defense of active citizenship.
Hmm.
Shailendra ultimately poses his questions not just to the silent magistrate, but to the broader public under the light of the Constitution.
Yes, and the defining message that emerges is, in a democracy, asking questions is a right, not a crime.
Right, because a bureaucracy relies on attrition. It relies on the 15-day delays, the impenetrable ledgers, the exhausting runarounds to wear a citizen down until they quietly accept the injustice.
But Shiv Govind's refusal to abandon his 1.919 hectares and Shailendra's aggressive demand for an inquiry into the breached custodial logis prove that democratic rights are not passive. True citizenship requires demanding accountability, even when the administration chooses silence.
They only exist if you enforce them.
Exactly. The machinery of accountability only moves when citizens apply relentless friction to it. Demanding an answer from a silent authority isn't an act of rebellion. It is the fundamental duty of a citizen in a functioning democracy.
I couldn't agree more. So, to bring this deep dive to a close, from the ancestral soil of Azamgಢ to the digital corridors of the PMO, to that agonizing delay on May 8th, to the shocking breach of the court vault, it has been a staggering journey.
It really has.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to ponder on your own. Throughout this deep dive, we've seen how entirely dependent we are on the fragile architecture of records. We place our absolute faith in the written word, in property deeds, digital portals, ledgers, and official seals to prove who we are and what we own. We assume these records are the bedrock of reality.
Right, we just trust the paper.
But as we've seen with the subtle stroke of a Lekpal's pen during consolidation, or a material correction hidden in a courthouse vault, the physical and digital records of our existence can be quietly, devastatingly erased by the very people tasked with guarding them.
In an instant.
So if the documents that define our existence can be so easily altered, where does our true identity actually reside? Is it really in the vulnerable pages of a government ledger waiting to be consolidated and erased? Or is it, as Shiv Govind's long, agonizing fight suggests, rooted in the very soil we stand on, something that paper can never truly capture?
That is the ultimate question.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.